Gentlemen, if you can kindly be seated so that we can start with the session. We are running pretty late and doing all justice to the speakers, giving them time to share their knowledge and information with us. For we are also looking to a lot of interaction with all of you. And that's going to be possible only if we start on time, and then we can have some space and time also for the Q&A. So now we are going to be sector specific. In our pre-lunch sessions, we have broadly touched on, if we look into the entire supply chain management, streamlining that, what are the bottlenecks, what are the challenge, what are going to be the key drivers. We have spoken about the role of the 3PLs now, the third party logistics, how they can now play a more pronounced role. That's where the industry is going to be evolving in that part. But yes, in that there's a lot of trust which needs to be built between the end user and the service providers. That's going to be taking time, but we see this setting in now. So now, specific to the industry, we have this panel discussion where we have specialized supply chain strategies for heavy engineering and project logistics. This we are going to be discussing. And I would like to invite our speakers and the moderator. The session is going to be moderated by Mr. Amit Bansal, Senior Director, Deloitte Tahamatsu, India. May I request you in and invite you to kindly join us as a moderator of this session. And people who are seated behind, may I request you to kindly come in front, because this is session specific to the heavy engineering and logistics. So probably you can be very few people in the hall. You can move in front if you wish to. Inviting now our panelists here. We were supposed to be joined by Mr. Tejinder Vora, but he had a pressing engagement. He is not able to join us in this session as a panelist, but we have Enzo Murada joining us. He is Country SCM, Strategic Sourcing Head. This is Muraba. Your name is Muraba. Marota. Okay. Enzo Marota joins us from Strategic Sourcing Head, he is. Thank you for joining us. Inviting Animesh Kumar, Director PDP Shipping, Mr. Rajesh Mehta, ED Leeladhar Pasu, Mr. Sunil Kapoor, MD SAR Freight. Once again thanking SAR Freight for being the sponsors of this session. And as already introduced, the moderator of the session, Mr. Amit Bansal. Now this session we were supposed to start actually at 1:30. Mr. G. Kannan, I'm so sorry. Mr. G. Kannan, Head Logistics, Larsen and Toubro. My apologies, sir. So the session we were supposed to start at 1:30. We are starting almost an hour late. It's 2:30 now. I leave it to the panelists and the moderator how to manage this session. There's a time challenge definitely we have in hand. We try having an interactive session also with the audience. So that is how we do try a little bit of spacing here with your remarks, and then probably opening it to the audience also.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. This session is on heavy engineering and logistics, and having the session immediately after lunch, we'll try and keep it lively and light, and not, as the name suggests, heavy engineering. Without wasting too much of time, I'll just kind of, because all of you are logistics experts, I will just set the context by giving a short story. Where for the first time, I as a common man and not as a professional, realized the importance of project logistics. A few years back, you will all remember there was an aircraft at Bombay Airport which has overshot the runway. And its nose wheel had actually gone out of operation. And that aircraft was actually stranded at the airport for a few days. Then the airlines decided that they will use that aircraft for their simulated training. So they decided to move the aircraft from the airport to the training site. And that's when, it was transported. It's right in the city of Mumbai that happened. I don't know how many of you would be aware of this. It moved at a speed of almost, less than a kilometer an hour. The entire traffic got jammed. All the local authorities were up in arms in terms of how such a cargo could be moved without permissions. And at the end, specialized guys had to be called in to be able to move that aircraft to its desired location. Idea of giving this story was to kind of, through a story, give you all the challenges which are there from a project logistics perspective. On the esteemed panel, we have the industry representation both from the user side as well as from the service provider side, who will talk from the point of view of challenges and how, also bring out some of the case studies where they could have overcome those challenges and the kind of pressures it puts on their planning and procurement strategies. So, Mr. Kannan, I will start with you. My first question would be in terms of, L&T, we are all aware is a large company and is in projects, and you would be moving complex, odd ship cargo every now and then. So how do you plan for these movements, especially in a context like, in the Indian setup where we do have gaps on the infrastructure side?
Good afternoon. Am I audible? Am I audible? Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A question which, I've been answering all the time, regularly, because when we say we are in projects, our job itself is to move oversized, over-dimensional, overweight cargo. That's our business. And when I lead a team of logistics professionals in the company, we continuously have to innovate. We keep on thinking, what next? How to, for us, every job is a big challenge. And how we go about is something, you will be amazed. We start planning even before the tender is even published, during the RFQ stage itself, especially for a massive power project, or you have a refinery, you have a fertilizer plant. These are all generally, when we talk about India, this comes at a very remote location. So because government gives a lot of incentives, and when the plant is supposed to be established there, maybe after 4 years, 48 months or 50 months, when the tender is published, there itself we start thinking that where we should manufacture all our equipment. Over a period of time, what has happened is earlier we used to have smaller packages, 150 tons, 200 tons. But then with the, the scale of modularization which has happened, and then the process, equipment, where most of the customers want all the things to be manufactured and completed at the factory itself, and only bring and assemble it at site. It is not possible, to bring all small things and then start assembling at site, because first of all, skilled labor is not available, the equipment is not available. And in L&T, what we do is we do a lot of, outsourcing, where we only get into the core things. Most of the things are outsourced, and then we bring everything together in the factory, and then make a big module and then transport it. First and foremost, what we need is that wherever such massive plants come, they should have a waterfront. Fortunately, the government also has been thinking that way, and whenever any big refinery has come, of late, be it on the, near at Orissa, where we had this IOCL Paradeep refinery which had come up. You take the power plant which had come up for Nigdi, which was on the hinterland, the Cochin refinery. Most of these are located very close to the waterfront. So what we do is that whenever a project of this size comes up, we decide where to manufacture. Manufacturing plays a very important role, because if you are going to manufacture somewhere far away from the site, you definitely need a waterfront, and without water, such big modules cannot be transported. Just to give you an example, lately when we completed this JP's Nigdi project, which was somewhere near Satna in Madhya Pradesh, we had to transport the turbine and generator, each weighing about 425 tons, single piece, from our factory at Hazira, which is in Surat, up to Nigdi. The challenge was that how do we transport such a large parcel, because it is not possible to go by road. None of the bridges which we have, which are designed, can carry more than 200 tons load. So the challenge was that our factory was there, the best of equipment is available there. We would not have, manufactured this elsewhere. And after manufacturing, we sent it by a coastal vessel up to Calcutta. From Calcutta, we did a transshipment onto a barge, onto a river-going barge. We carried it on the river Ganga. From there up to Allahabad. At Allahabad, we rolled it over onto the hydraulic axle. And then 350 kilometers by road, because it was deep in the hinterland, there was no river or anything possible. We had to build a couple of bypasses. The estimated time was about 240 days, to complete this journey. But we could actually complete it only in about 368 days. That means exactly 1 year. So you can imagine what a big role logistics has played in the entire project. So when my journey itself is going to be 1 year, I had to plan further 2 years ahead of that, so that this project can be completed, because there are so many difficulties, there are so many constraints which come on the way, which one cannot imagine. Despite having a complete logistics plan in place, despite having all the inputs available, doing multiple route surveys, we found that these impediments come at the last minute, because nature is something which you cannot foretell, especially the river, where you expect a draft to be available on a particular time, especially during October to January, and that particular year the monsoon was left, the draft was not available. So it was not very easy for us to navigate on the Ganga, and we had to do dredging at all the places, because hardly 1.5 meters at some places the draft was available. Even the draft was the barge was finding it difficult to maneuver. And this is some of the things which we did. Then we had to build lot of bypasses on the Son river. Now building a bypass again has to happen during the non-monsoon time, because if there is during the regular rains, you can't build a bypass, because these are all temporary routes which are to be there. So there is a lot of, what I would say, a lot of thinking, a lot of travel, and continuous dialogue with the service provider. So this is just an example which you are given. And whenever any project is there, what happens, these projects are coming at multiple locations, the culture is different, no two projects are the same. I cannot say that I did a similar project 10 years back at some location, so I could replicate that. No. In India, each project is a challenge by itself. Each project has got different characteristics. Each project has got a different objective. And there are a lot of undercurrents which are there all the time. So it is not that the company has been awarded a project. The most difficult part is how to execute. And we have learned a lot of lessons. We have burnt our fingers. We have lost money. But then now we feel a bit confident that such projects we are able to handle. So we handle cargo weights right from 25 tons up to 2,500 tons. This is our range. We have transported the world's #1 regenerator, weighing 2,400 tons single piece from our factory to Reliance Jamnagar. So these are all some of the achievements which we have done, and it all happened only because not that somebody has taught us or we had a collaboration. because Indian logistics is a very, very different ball game altogether. You can, bring all the best global practices, but you have to think locally. Because all local issues, it is so unique to the country and so unique to the region and to the demography of that place that one cannot just foretell what will happen. And we have, had such opportunities to do it. And based on this expertise and experience, we have ventured into other countries, especially the Middle East, where we have been very successful. We are executing a lot of projects. L&T is a household name in the Middle East. Most of the projects there, we have a big presence. 40% of our revenue today comes from exports. And this is where we have been banking, because when we had a slowdown for the last 3-4 years, what we had perceived at that time that we should look at exports in a big way has, given us a thrust. And that is how we have been able to maneuver this, slowdown in India. And we quickly could get into those international projects, which gave us a better expertise and, in touch with all global players. And now we are recognized as one of the leading global players, and we are as good or even better than the other global players in the world.
Thanks, Mr. Kannan. I will come back to you on some of the challenges which you referred to. I will move on to Enzo. Enzo, Mr. Kannan has given me food for thought in terms of my next question to you, and you being a global company. What kind of challenges you think you face, especially given your global practices and the Indian context, how you need to tweak your global protocols in moving project cargo when it comes to the Indian context?
Yeah. So, hello to everyone. In ABB, we have a product business and we have then project business. Especially when we talk about project business, there are a lot of challenges if you come to the logistic part. Basically, the main challenge that we have starting from the beginning, as my colleague was telling, that from the tender stage itself, because basically those projects are in terms of specification not very clear from the beginning, but we have to give a kind of detailed plan for the logistics, as well as we have to come with a cost in order to participate to the tender itself. So this is the first challenge, is how I can estimate the cost when the project and the tender is not very clear as well. So there is a lot of analysis must be done. And in this, the service provider need to support the end users, because basically their expertise and their knowledge in such an area, because as rightly he said, that most of the time this project will be executed in very remote place where the logistics and the costs are not very clear. So this is the first one. The second is, we would like to do this in a very, we would have a good, let me say, accuracy of the cost, as well as we would like to have this in a very short time. So the timing of the quotation itself, it is one more of the challenge that we have. And so we are working more and more with some specific service provider where we know they start to know about ABB, about our requirements, and they start to fine tune the quotation according to our requirements. So we will be able to short time. And then of course the major challenge will be the execution, because all these uncertain things has to be then solved during the execution times. And most of the time the project and the cargo is not as per the plan. So we have to be flexible, the transporter has to be flexible to face the challenge unforeseen and to move on. So basically, let me summarize that from the analysis, from the cost and the execution part, those are the three major challenges. Then we need a kind of trust. The first session we talk about trust, because you should understand that during this process, most of the things are going to be changed during the execution part. So if there is no trust, then a lot of disputes start to come in terms of payments, in terms of execution, quality of the service, and so on. So one of the major challenges is how to have a contract for this kind of things. And slowly, along with a good setup of a supplier, we are working a kind of global contracts, where most of those things has been captured now, and there is a clear understanding how to proceed across and we are trying to solve in this way. So basically, those are the major challenge in the project business.
Sure. Thanks, Enzo. So from the end users, I will move on to the service providers. And Rajesh, I will want you to pitch in from a end user's perspective. How are you geared to, help the end users like L&T? Mr. Kannan mentioned about, the 240-day plan becoming actually 368. So how is it that the service providers can come in and help in managing that gap and trying to reduce?
Good afternoon. See, before I express my view, I would like to use my company's opening statement where we have mentioned logistics makes all the difference between survival and success. For ages, India has been missing out grossly on conceptualization and implementation, because of which today the logistics inefficiency cost is almost $45 billion. And if this is not controlled today, this is going to rise to almost $140 billion by 2020. Two-thirds of India is yet to get built. Now the pressure of all this is on the logistics service provider. So what I am trying to say, we are in a state of survival. We are still fighting on day-to-day basis. As of service provider point of view, the challenges can be explained in two contexts. It is one when the cargo is within the port area, and one which is when it is leaving the port area and it is in the main area, domestic area. When we say that when the cargo is in within the port area, we have to deal with customs and port operations. Customs, we must admit that the clearance time and the processing time has reduced because of adoption of technology, and they have increased the processes fast, and we have actually reduced from 12 to 5 working days clearance right now. But yet we are still not done away with the loads of documentations, load of permits, delayed permissions, and lot of fragmented policies and procedures. When we come to the port operations point of view, the port as usual has its own ill-equipped. It is not maintained well. There is no proper storage facilities for heavy cargo or engineering cargos. There is no, port doesn't have any priority berthing facilities for heavy vehicles, heavy vessels. So this all put together is adding on cost and time to the whole clearances. So when the end users demand a certain set of parameters to operate on in time and cost, so there are some challenges which we face within the port and the customs area where we have to plan it very well, closely. As my colleague mentioned, trust is very important. They have to trust the service provider for their capabilities and deliverables. Now coming back from the cargo from the port area, the roads are the biggest issues right now what we are facing. Poor connectivity. In Bombay, we have to actually maneuver the whole cargo through the city roads, which is very narrow. The high-tech cargos cannot cross because of the electrical low-lying overheads going above us. There are a lot of connectivities before we hit the national highways. So putting all again together, the time commitment becomes a very difficult task to project on. There are a lot of instances where we have seen that the infrastructure has added time and cost to the whole thing. And getting down the infrastructure cost, which is currently between almost 13 to 7%, which always the end user wants to come out with. Government should actually follow the mantra, which is nothing but infrastructure and infrastructure development. And this infrastructure has to be with a vision of almost 20 years, which can have good connectivity with rail, road, air, and waterways. It has to have a single multimodal operating policy, because today roads have other regulations, air has different regulations, ports operate under different regulations, customs has their own regulations. So as a service provider, we have to ensure the all compliances before we deliver the cargo to the end site. So I'm sure if this is taken care of, service provider can definitely achieve the required standards which an end user wants. And India will become one of the best quality yet competitive country for the world. Sure. That is what my view is.
Sure. So, Sunil, my next question to you is that, we talk of infrastructure constraints, and, a lot of these infrastructure constraints are known before actually the freight is moved. So is there a way that it can be planned better to move, keeping in mind those constraints?
You see, firstly, thanks a lot for having me. I'm Sunil Kapoor, and I thank Economic Times and the panel members for having me here. As regards to let me first tell you about my company. Like Mr. Kannan was just mentioning, that we get involved with our clients. We specialize in project movement, and our clients wants to get involved right at the tendering stage when they are submitting their bids. And we are providing them route survey. We do conduct route surveys for them. We give them the feasibility reports, whether the cargo can be moved, how the cargo has to move. And coming on, apart from now, answer to your question, yes, we are having a lot of problems, like in movement of cargo within country. We require a lot of permissions from various authorities, and there are some regulations which are being set by central government, and every state looks at it differently. And for every movement in different states, we have to deal with them differently. This, I feel, can be simplified by having one window clearances.
Sure.
And we have, in fact, approached government for having these solutions, but still we have a long way to go in this. To our clients, we are, I'll just give you a recent example about our company. We were moving one particular shipment, ODC consignment, from Vizag, Visakhapatnam, to North India. It had to come. Now that particular cargo was, the client had given us a 30 days time to deliver that cargo. And the permission, to obtain a permission, it took us 45 days just to move. And the client does not understand this. He says, I have given you a contract, you have signed a paper with me that I have to deliver within 30 days, so you have to deliver in 30 days.
And was taking approvals your responsibility? Or
they had put our responsibility, though we were doing on their behalf.
Sure.
But that is how the authorities are working here.
Okay.
And similarly, like we being in power projects, we are specializing for power sector, and we have to go to remote places where there are no roads, and we have to construct bypasses, we have to do a lot of civil work and for movement of the cargoes. And of late, we had to move a cargo in a remote place in Himachal Pradesh where there was no roads. And the client wanted us to move a transformer, a heavy transformer, to that particular area. Right from Bombay, we had to enter Gujarat state, and every different state had their own regulations, and it became very difficult for us to complete the movement. Then once we reached Himachal, then there are no roads. We had to make roads. And the clients, normally, this is my experience with my clients, they say once we have given you the responsibility, once you have accepted the responsibility, you have to deliver the cargo till site.
So you also mentioned about some of the surveys which you do as a prelude to actually moving the freight. So these kind of things don't...
No, it does come, and we do point out. But then the road, in fact, clients sometimes assure, because state governments are assuring them that we would be, or their client is assuring them that by the time you are ready with your cargo, we'll make roads. But actually, in reality, it is not there.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Sure.
So these are the problems which we are facing.
Sure. So, Animesh, coming over to you, I was having a chat with you and you mentioned that, this is in the context that, given that we have infrastructure constraints and it will take time for that capacity to come up, you are mentioning about, some of the idle capacity being there with some of the institutions in the vicinity of, let's say, a port or an airport or some of these large institutions, which could actually be used for coming over certain bottlenecks.
Yes. Yeah, prior to myself and Imesh Kumar from PDP Shipping and Projects, prior to coming to this, I would like to add some more points in correlation with what our panelists, esteemed panelists discussed.
Sure.
When we discuss when we plan a project in logistics, prior to execution of the plan, at the very beginning stage, we have a method statement. In discussions with the factory or the client, although all the precautions are taken so that each and every contingency should be included with the proper solution in the method statement. Still, when we, as Mr. Kannan told, when we actually go for the execution, problems do come. And these problems are of the nature which we are never ever imagined of. But that does not mean that the project will not go onwards. So, when we ask for the project logistics, the very word expertise in project logistics means when we are making the method statement, what are the contingency that we can find out in the very beginning and how we can keep on covering all these contingencies so that there should be a proper flow of the cargo. So many occasions, say there are two logistics providers, then when it is on the turnkey basis from say point A to point B, in between there are the contingency. So one who is knowing the contingencies may have a higher cost because every contingency has a cost factor. Those who do not, they cannot envision the contingency. They will not envision the cost factor also related to that. So they may offer a low costing. So it is also for the industries, as I explained to Mr. Kannan, to understand that when there are the quotations to the industries, then you have the focus on the technical expertise and you have the focus on the price. But between all these, there are the contingencies which can be brought forward only by the experts, and these contingencies, because has the cost factor which has been envisioned in the very beginning, there are the scope where we cut short these contingencies, keep on then cutting short the profit, and at the same time we are ensuring a very smooth delivery. Now coming to the question that regarding the infrastructure, yes, in our country, there is a word that is very popular in our project logistics. We say innovative method. Now we need to understand what is this innovation. This is not an innovation of technology. We are not producing some product, high-tech product. This innovation is because there is the limitation put by the infrastructure. Because we do not have the infrastructure, so we need to innovate some method that is technologically, scientifically correct, and we can still deliver. So when we are doing the innovative method, then there is the limitations of the infrastructure. Even the word heavy, as you told in the very beginning, that this is heavy engineering, but we would like to make it light. The word heavy is also a relative word. What may be heavy for one may not be heavy for the other. Maybe in India, for 150 ton, we say it's a heavy lift consignment. Beyond 50 ton, it becomes heavy lift consignment. But in countries like Korea, in countries like South Korea and China, you go even 200 ton. They handle so efficiently because they have the proper infrastructure. They have the machinery which can handle such consignments without any problem. But for us, it becomes problem because it becomes a heavy lift. our port infrastructure do not support, our road do not support, our railway. I have never heard that any ODC consignment moved. In the very beginning of this program, we came that the heavy engineering, ODC consignment we have never heard of being moved by the railways, Concur. So these are the basic problems that we are facing. Now, the most, unwanted and most unfortunate part is that, say there is a factory and some consignment to be delivered over there. So, whenever we plan, most of the time the discharge of the consignment is planned at the nearest port. Most of the time the ports in India, they do not have the infrastructure to handle like 150 ton, 200 ton, 300 ton consignment. But as of now, Mr. Kannan knows that most of the industries are importing 300 ton, 400 ton, 500 ton consignments. At the same time, in the vicinity of the port, there are the infrastructures available with the, say, shipyard. The shipyards may be having the lifting capacity of 1,000 ton, 1,500 ton. But these are for a specific purpose. Might be they are the export-oriented unit, might be these infrastructure that the industry or the shipyards are having, these are for their own utilization. In our business term, we say for non-commercial use. So when we try to utilize those infrastructure for a project that is not related to that particular industry or the factory, then it is the utilization of it is the commercial utilization. For that, there is the relative maritime board of that particular place. So this maritime boards has to approve that. For that, for non-commercial, some infrastructure that is for non-commercial use, you are using for commercial purpose, you need to pay some fee to them, but getting permission from them is almost, it is a very, very difficult task, and many project logistics companies, they have lost lots of money because they planned in the very beginning that this will happen in this way, but unfortunately that does not happen. If it is export-oriented unit, then the customs come into picture, they will not allow handling. So in a country where there is the lack of infrastructure, still the infrastructure which are available for a specific use, those infrastructure keep idle, but those infrastructure are not utilized for the commercial use for the benefit of the trade. That is very unfortunate that we need to find out a solution for that.
Sure. Mr. Kannan, Enzo, Animesh mentioned about the correlation between contingencies in regards to movement of project cargo and the ultimate cost which the end user is willing to pay. So how do you plan or look at these aspects, your views on how do you deal with that situation?
See what happens in the initial stage, as you said, the packing list, the dimensions are not very clear to us. And you get an X cost, for a project which is to be executed after 4 years. It is extremely difficult, to visualize a price, especially when the fuel prices are going up, the other costs, cost of equipment, and even the port charges. If you see the private port, the charges are increasing day by day, except for the ports which are owned by the government, central government, where more or less we have the stamp, so the cost increases are not there. But then all these things have to be envisaged in our logistics costs. So what we try to do is that we look at the general inflation, what has been there, all over. And we also make a comparison with the costs of the same infrastructure, what we need to pay in developed countries like Europe or other places. Sometimes the costs in India are much more than those places. So what we do is we have to give a real estimate. Otherwise what happens is many times the marketing department comes back and tells us that we lost this project because of the high logistics costs. And this is a very common excuse for everyone to say that we lost this because of logistically we are not convenient to the place. So what we try to envisage is that while we estimate based on traditional methods, taking all the costs into this, in the end, suppose we arrive at a cost of say 100. What we do is when we do an estimation, we definitely take the use of service providers. There is always a tendency that these providers, to be on the safe side, to be very cautious, always quote a slightly higher price because there are a lot of unknown elements which are there. So what we do is we take the cost as it is, and in the initial first cut, we give the cost based on what we have. We keep a 10% contingency, on all this, and we give the cost to the marketing department. Many a times, what happens is there is, in the final negotiations, there is always a gap. Say the logistics cost is say 60 crores or 70 crores. They say that we are higher by about 3 or 4 crores, and if logistics is able to bring down the cost, then we are sure of winning the tender. Nobody will speak about, lowering the costs of manufacture or the equipment and other things, but everybody thinks that logistics is a very easy thing, and these guys, have got a lot of things under their sleeve, and there are every chances that they can bring it down. They think that we have a magic wand in our hands, and we need to talk to a few people, maybe contact some more service providers who will give an easy solution. And mind you, many a times even service providers, they go wrong. It is not that, as you said, to err is human. And many a times we found that service providers have given some incorrect information because some calculation goes wrong somewhere. So what we do is we also work, and we not only have we to supervise, but we have to, what I should say, look at what the prices they have given, and we have to validate that what the service provider giving is correct. So there is a validating process which is on parallelly, and we also break up all the costs into smaller elements. And once when the marketing team comes back and tells us that you are higher by such and such cost, we do try to contact some of the forwarders again. We do try to see, rework the whole thing quickly because they give only 2 days or 3 days to rework. And sometimes I also want to tell you is that as logistics service providers, we have a gut feeling with us, having worked in the previous projects, although no two projects are the same, that yes, we can give a small reduction in this, and we will face it at the time of execution. Because many a times the pressure is so intense on us that unless we relent, and even the top bosses say that yes, you can manage, you just give it. So we also, fall a prey to all these requests, and we do give it. And many a times it has happened that when we have been actually awarded the contract, we found that even the original estimate which you had given in the tendering was itself wrong. And yes, we made some mistakes in the past, but as you said, two wrongs does not make a correct one. And we only learn with experiences, but then over a period of time, we have understood that, the particular terrain, what are the likely problems which are going to come. And with a lot of modern technology which has come, and then the governments in various states have been very, you can say, pro-friendly. Earlier they were not interested in all these big cargoes. Now they also understand. We try and go and explain to them that these are cargoes of national importance. These are all cargoes when implemented will have a great effect on the local population, will generate employment, will increase, the level of the people at that place. It will also help us in growing the economy. I think the people have understood this. Some sort of Desh Bhakti has to be built. So we use this method also, and we have found that many people have been very warm to all these approaches. As I said, there is no any book which will give you all the procedures, how to go about. The management and the team only knows that we have to execute the job. Come what may, whatever be the reasons, we have to execute. And many a times we found that we are at a dead end and there is a wall and how to go about. And it is impossible to do certain things. I can quote an example a few years back when we had this 2611 in Bombay. We had a defense cargo which was to go. It's not a very big cargo, about 8 meters in, it was a dished end for the submarine project. It could not go by road. But from the factory we had to transport it to the port, and from the port it had to go to Vizag. Now when we reached the port gate, 8 meters, there is no way it can go into the port gate. Earlier times, we were very confident that whenever we had a problem, we used to break the gate, the port gate, have the cargo admitted inside, and then we will rebuild. Now because of this terrorist attack, the government, the security and the CISF said that we will not allow you to break the wall. My cargo is at the port gate and the ship is waiting there. Tomorrow the ship is coming. If I don't give, detention is in dollars, that. And we were in a real fix, and everywhere a lot of frantic calls coming here and there from everywhere, because they know that the so-and-so team is there and he has to do it. Now at the middle of the night, what is it that idea, as I said, innovative ideas, there is no innovative idea. We all had to put our heads together, go to the side at the port. I was also at the port with all the team members. We were thinking, we only felt that we should get some idea. You remember the story many years back when there was some cargo which was passing through the bridge, which was hitting, the top portion, and through the tunnel on the bridge. One of the boys who was grazing cattle gave a suggestion that you reduce the air in the tire of the wheel, the height will come down and the cargo can pass. So we also felt that some idea we should get from the local people there, because we absolutely could not think of it. And suddenly, we found that there was a crane which was operating there. So an idea struck one of my team members that why don't we scale this wall, because the equipment was not very heavy, it was only 30 tons. So we brought the crane operator. We took one day to plan our action. We asked the CISF there that we would like to scale the wall. It is like jumping the wall. Ultimately the plan worked. We were able to lift it through a crane from this side of the compound on the road, and we put the trailer on the other side of the port and just scaled the wall. And the wall was not much, as it's about 20 feet. We scaled the wall through the crane, and the crane put it on the other side, and we were able to achieve it. It was not that it was in my mind and other things. There was a cost overrun, because we thought that breaking of the gate cost about 2 lakh rupees. Here it so happened that we only paid 50,000 rupees for scaling for the crane to operate, and we were able to save some money, some innovative thought which never came to our mind ever, because we always thought that there is a gate, we just break the gate on one side, admit the cargo, once and then rebuild it, because this is what has been doing traditionally. And when there was a sudden sort of a issue which came up, we brought a solution to that. So what happens is, it is all coming at the spur of the moment. I just cannot plan all this in advance, because we don't know what problem we are going to face at the 11th hour. And the cost is something which sometimes there are huge overruns, especially for detention when you are waiting. He said it took 45 days to get permission. Now, with MORTH coming in, that is this MORTH, Ministry of Roads and Highways, they have streamlined the process in the last 6 months. They said now there will be a single window where you can apply for permission, and they will have a smooth movement, so that there is no stopping of all this cargo at various states. Hopefully the new government which is coming in, they have promised the association that they will make it very simple, like a foreign country, that where you need to apply in advance, they will give all the permissions, and you pay a fee per kilometer, and that is it. Hopefully those things will happen. But then, as you know, these uncertainties will continue, and each time the location is different, the transportation with there. We also talked that by rail we don't move any ODC, Concor or other things. I can tell you, in foreign countries everything moves by rail. If you go to Russia, if you go to US, all ODC cargoes in Europe, mostly for 200 and 250 tons moves by rail. Rail, you have a lot of advantages. There is no any permission. There are special wagons which are there. In India, only BHEL has got these type of wagons. But getting permission from the railways, right from RDSO Lucknow, getting the permission process today is about 15 months. Now I cannot wait for 15 months for my project, for my cargo to pass. That is why we take the easy way, which is road. And road, the bureaucracy is so simple. The logistics cost increases because everywhere there is speed money. Everywhere you have to do it, otherwise the cargo doesn't pass. So we have tried to see that where all possible, we can try to reduce this gap. And I can tell you that the awareness has come in the country in the last 1.5, 2 years, especially now in the last 6 months. There is a lot of awareness and people have been very cooperative. Even the local people, wherever we have been passing the cargo, they have been demanding huge money for the right of passage of the cargo through that particular road. We have tried, and as you said, we cannot leave it to the service provider. I think it is a joint partnership which we have to do. As a company, we also have a big duty, and service provider is only providing the service. He has got very limited resources. So when we talked in the morning session about partnership, I also would like to go a step further and say that he is an extension of our role. And unless we are very close and we understand each other better, such large project moments cannot happen in the country.
Thanks, Mr. Kannan. I think you have reinforced the saying, adversity is the mother of all creativity and invention.
Yeah.
I have lots of questions to ask, but in the interest of time, I will want a chance to the audience to ask question to the esteemed panelists, and your views you could kind of, if there are questions within that, you could answer that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that gentleman.
Lot of questions.
I'll come to you.
So they are the people who will have good questions.
Good afternoon. My name is A.K. Chaudhary. I'm from Engineers India Limited. I fully agree with Mr. Kannan's view because the job he does, we also do the same thing for our projects. And we face the same kind of challenges and same strategies. Nothing else to add. Everybody knows the projects are not built in the metros. They are always located at the far off sites where approachability is not there. Naturally, infrastructure problem will be there. And the part of infrastructure problems which we are talking about, the port connectivity and other things, that are also have been well discussed, so nothing to repeat them also. It's very well known. The panel discussion for this session was, what are the strategies? We know all these things, that infrastructure problem are there. When the project is conceived, we plan much in advance. The route surveys are taken at the tender stage also. When the item is actually built, that takes 10 to 12 months, and after that, the real transportation starts. By the time when the route survey was taken, and when the actual transportation starts, on the same route, you will find the new challenges. Suddenly something has occurred, some metro started, some flyover started, some MLA has put his own holdings, something like that. Now, in public sector kind of thing, my question is to the service provider. Whatever the price has been fixed, even after taking the contingency amount, we are not able to pay the extra price, for the known reason, because we are in the public sector. A private customer always can do. He can sympathize and he can always make some changes. But what are the strategy, to take on these challenges which suddenly emerged, and customer is not willing to pay you more the amount than the, which is fixed in the tender. You know the infrastructure problem right now. You know the infrastructure problem even 2 years afterwards, what is going to happen. So I think the challenge is, what are the strategies? What is, how you plan to overcome? That's the key question. And the second question is, the Ministry of Surface Transport, right, Mr. Kannan also just said, that a single window has been provided. But that single window, I think, has made some, little complications are there, that for every bridge, the bridges are 200-year-old, 100-year-old and other things. So they are putting the onus on the, the fellow who is going to use these bridges. And if something happens, you have to fill up the bond and other things. So these are creating now new problems. So how these service providers, if they are union, are they taking up any issue with the ministry on these issues? So these are the two questions. One is the strategy and one is the taking up with the ministry.
As far as taking up with the ministry is concerned, we are we have approached ministries for simplifying the rules, because especially this permission is a big issue, what Mr. Kanan just said. If you are having a package of more than, we have open permission presently up to only 100 or 108 tons of the load. But beyond that, we still need the necessary permissions, and we need clearances from the various authorities. Like just now Mr. Chaudhary mentioned, he happens to be one of my clients. So,
I think the specific question was
Yeah.
being in a public sector,
Yeah.
a new contingency comes up.
Yeah.
You know, a new flyover is coming up, which
Yeah.
was not there 12 months back. How does, from an end user perspective, a PSU react to it, and how can a service provider help in such a situation?
I would like to answer this question. Yeah, I've been on BHEL's service scope for almost 4-5 years, and I did experience this type of things, where the scope is mapped on the tender paper, and the rates are fixed, everything is fixed, and we understand that being a PSU, you have your limitations in terms of spending more money. But there are limitations on your front and our front as well. So in this case, where we are handling almost 6,000 tons of steel plates, used steel plates, the discharge had happened and vessel was discharging some other goods, so we left for the day. It was late night, and the next day morning when we came back to the port, we saw a lot of oil pipes being stacked on our plates. Now this was never planned in our scope as well. So we had to actually hire the equipments, we had to take the port permissions and sort all things out. These are the activities which we never take into our cost. So we try to explain to the customer, we try to call the port authorities, wherever we can dilute the cost, wherever we can try to accommodate, we try to accommodate. Or else this has to be considered as something which is beyond scope or beyond control factor. So PSU do have such provisions in their tenders where they consider force majeure or beyond control scopes.
So let us say, I would like to take it from the other's perspective. As your question was, see, what happens most of the time, there is the limitation. So if the limitation is there, we have to find out whether there is a solution, yes, no. If it is yes, we can do. If one can do, others can also do. If one cannot do, or 3 or 4 partners, your logistics partners say that there is no feasibility, in order to carry this particular project, you have to accept the limitation. What is the most unfortunate part? Many times the industry, they do not listen to what the project logistics service providers, they do say. Like in some of the cases, I take just 1 or 2 examples. One example that happened in the vicinity where the Larsen and Toubro, Mr. Kanan's factory is there. There was one particular piece of 230 or 270 ton that was to be carried from place A to place B. In between there was a bridge. So many of the service providers, they told there may one alternate route to be expedited or some reinforcement to be done onto this bridge in order to carry this consignment. But alternate routing and reinforcement, these are having a massive cost factor. The industry, being a public sector company also, they did not allow this. So what did they do? Somebody told we can do this. So they waited for the miracle to happen. So many times the industry, they fully knowing the limitation, also in order to cut short their costing, they feel that let some miracle to happen, and they plan in such a way that there may be contingency, there may be accident, and if that does not happen, that is a surprising thing. So as in this particular case, the bridge collapsed, and the people still for the last 3 years they are facing. Many such cases are there. Now one more thing I would like to add, that there are certain points, what we say critical points. Critical points are, say when we are moving a consignment, as it may move in a hydraulic trailer, say if it is 70 ton ODC consignment, it may move in a hydraulic trailer. At the same time, it can be planned in a mechanical trailer also. There is a cost factor. If the mechanical is costing 10 lakhs of rupees, the hydraulic will cost 20 lakhs of rupees. Now there is the tilting when we are doing the execution and road transportation, there may be the tilting. So when it is tilting, for the hydraulic, yes, to a certain extent, we have the transport stability calculation. We can find out, and there is the stability, and we are sure that this way it will go. But still, there is a huge cost difference, so the industry, many times they stick that, no, you try on hydraulic because others are giving this much quotation. So this is also the problem that the service providers are facing. So it is for the industry also to understand that if somebody is assuring them miracle, if somebody is assuring that there are no contingency, you be with us, we will sort out blah, 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 then all these are false promises. What is on the paper, what is in the method statement, what are the contingencies, what are the steps, still the problems will remain. As Mr. Kannan told that there was a, wall, all of a sudden it appeared. For you it appeared. We were doing for Larsen and Toubro 400-ton consignment road loadout at Mumbai port. And the bars that was planned, there was 1 feet, it was just having the 2 feet edge either side while moving through the lock gate of the port. Now the officials were afraid, if the lock gate is damaged, then whole operations will stop. Then under such circumstances, when you have method statement, you have science, you have methodology, you have precision, you have experience, still somebody is telling that no, you cannot do because it will damage like this. Their apprehension may also be correct. But under such circumstances, what to do? Because the service provider is right, so also the industry is right. Maybe that the port is also right under such circumstances. Then what are the, still if it takes 2 days for the negotiation, 1 day loss is in the term of say 15,000 US dollar. So that becomes a contingent cost factor. So these are the circumstances also do they prevail. So what I say that, putting all the work to the service provider is not correct.
Sir, I'll finish up I think whatever the answer you have given. The scope which you are telling, okay, we can sympathize with each other, that's it. But what we want is, because we know the challenges, and somebody says I will take through this route, and somebody says I cannot go through this route. So customer doesn't have that much energy that to travel whole India to find out first that whether it can go, because you are the specialist. Service provider is the specialist. And if somebody says I will do the miracle and all this thing, we have to believe him. I do not know, because I don't have the intelligence that, okay, if you want to go through this route, so and so bridges, they are this capacity, how much is the license capacity, how you will do this and all this thing. Because as a service provider, you have to find out a strategy that what is the best. But this is, I'm telling you the customer feedback, because this is, you are rightly, I didn't want to touch this topic, but this is how the customer is being treated.
Sure, gentlemen.
You should go for more service provider. You should have a better choice now.
And I also wanted to ask the same thing, sir. That is also my feeling, sir, basically, that as an expert, we depend on you as an expert, as a service provider. We consult you a different scenario and expect you to provide a certain guidance to us, and then we float a tender, and once it is floated, we come to a common denominator, and once it is finalized, then basically it has, we expect that you carry out service in that way. One more question.
I think we just have time for one last question. The gentleman there.
I just wanted to ask you this. I really appreciate the constraints that you pointed out. Do you feel that logistics comes right at the end after the product has been designed? Or do you think that the logistics constraints should be introduced at the time of the design of the product? Because in my experience, I've worked with some of the clients where we've taken these logistical constraints into the design so that some of the issues that you're pointing out, we could overcome. Exactly the kind of issues that you've been pointing out about moving from railways to road because of certain constraints, or moving from road to railways or through water, those kind of things. But this is, I'm talking about my experience in the United States. So I would love to hear from you. You've run out of time right now, maybe later on.
Sure.
No, I think
answer it right now if you're out of time.
Sure, I think this point did get covered, when Enzo and Mr. Kannan was responding, and they actually did mention that, they actually, based upon the constraints in logistics, they decide where to manufacture, where to procure, and where to have their vendors as well. As also that whether logistics come towards the end or in the beginning, I think all the speakers have spoken in terms of that they start from the RFQ stage itself at the time of tendering when it comes to project logistics. So project logistics very clearly has a deep impact on the entire plan of project execution, both from a procurement perspective as well as from the locations from where the material needs to be procured, and keeping the origination destination in mind, as also all the constraints which will be coming up on the during the route. So, so with that, I will just thank all the panelists for a lively discussion and their participation, and thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you to all the panelists. Definitely a very lively discussion. And in fact, when I was sitting there, when we were talking about innovation, in one of the conferences where I was, people were saying that in India, we don't talk about innovation, we talk more about jugaad. So you have to actually come up with that, with all these complexities which are there. But thank you to each one of you for sharing your insights. And I would like to request the session moderator, may I request you, sir, to kindly present the mementos to all our panelists. And may I request Mr. Sunil Kapoor to kindly present the memento to our moderator. And now I think, ladies and gentlemen, all of us can collectively thank them, thanking for sharing the experience. Thank you.